What do you get when a score of scientists perform a blitzkrieg on Africa's largest wetland? They came from across the globe: America, Britain, Norway, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa. 24 specialists in wetland systems met in Botswana's Okavango Delta during June to do a rap, the Okavango Rap. They started by collecting data in the main channel of the Okavango River in the upper panhandle. The next site was the northern delta with its lagoons and smaller channels. Then it was onwards to northwestern Moremi to sample semi-permanent channels and lagoons. The expedition finished southeast of Chief's Island in the seasonal floodplains. The rivers near Maun will be sampled by local scientists later in the season when the floodwaters reach there. Working as a team, the different scientists made rapid assessments in nearly 40 sites of water quality, vegetation, aquatic invertebrates, fish diversity, fisheries, and birds from this wetland system.
Most of the previous research has been on the big game and the terrestrial aspects, but a lot of the delta obviously is water, and so we need some information in order to make good conservation and management plans.
Field reports from all the base camps were fed by satellite phone to Washington, where they were edited and then distributed on the World Wide Web, illustrating that the Earth is becoming a real global village.
We want to convey the beauty of the Delta and the biological diversity here, and through the images and the stories that we're sending, build support for its conservation.
Aiming to get a scientific snapshot of the diversity and uniqueness of the Okavango Delta, the team was on the lookout for telltale signs that could say something about the conservation status of the delta, such as oxygen levels, acidity, and the salinity of water, the abundance or shortage of snails, which could be a go-between for diseases such as bilharzia, as well as the wealth and diversity of planktonic organisms, which tell something of the number of fishes.
And what's unique about our expedition is that it's an interdisciplinary team. So we're doing all of these different aspects at the same time, so we can correlate and see how one of the aspects fits in with the other.
Right now, the hottest issue in the Delta is whether the fish resources are being overexploited. But the fish biologists were unanimous that this is not a problem in the Delta yet.
The catch rates that we're observing, that means that the amount of fish we get every time we set the nets is it's quite high.
25, look over fat.
Fish sampling was exceptionally successful. More than 90% of the known fish species in the Botswana part of the Okavango system were found at the chosen sampling sites. Despite this continuing diversity and overall abundance, tension in the panhandle is rising. Tourist lodges target high-paying, trophy-seeking anglers, while commercial fishermen use nets to make their fishing efforts profitable.
There is a problem in that both these major groups are exploiting the same very small portion of that resource, and that is the large bream species.
The fish resource is an important money earner and one that could lead to conflict. So an important objective of the Okavango Rap was to survey the opinions and perceptions of people on the use and conservation of the Delta's natural assets.
The idea is workshop the data that we're going to get with communities, get their input, their interpretation of the data, and how they see the data influencing the way they subsisting or off-taking some of the resources.
Locals, such as scholars, students, tourist operators and scientists, were involved to establish a long-term monitoring program. The key element in the Delta is water, and both the amount and quality need constant checking.
It's quite clear to all of us on this expedition that what we've seen is that the Delta has some of the best quality water we've ever come across. And the final proof of the pudding, of course, is always taking it. Perfect. Great for drinking.
Fortunately, the water quality in the Okavango Delta is outstanding because it's been filtered through the vegetation of several thousands of square kilometers. As the water spreads from the panhandle into the delta, oxygen levels change, often dramatically. These differences, which affect the number and variety of species in the water, are natural. It is mainly the decomposing plant matter that uses up the oxygen. But when the water reaches the seasonally flooded plains, a remarkable change happens. Nature switches on its own water oxygen pump, which transforms the water in the semi-permanent channels and ponds into a biological wonderland. The myriad of islands are the kidneys of the Okavango Delta. The water is drinkable because natural salts are being concentrated in the center of these donut-shaped islands, while their fringes and surrounding water remain fresh. Trees play an important role in the maintenance of this freshwater system, and if they're chopped down, or even worse, killed by herbicides, the Okavango Delta would turn into a lifeless salt marsh. Salvinia molesta, or Kariba weed, was once controlled in the delta with a herbicide. In favorable conditions, this invader can double its mass in less than a week. It quickly covers the water surface and affects the lifestyle of many aquatic plants and animals.
Its range has increased quite a bit, and we are currently trying very hard to keep it within the range, which is already infested, and not to allow it to spread any farther.
Since the mid-80s, a highly successful biological program has replaced the herbicide, which sadly had already left harmful residues in the sediment layer.
So one of the most preferred control mechanisms is using biological agents that feed or that kill the weed. And one of those is a bug or a beetle. This weevil here, the adult has got a boring mouth part which drills holes in the leaves of the plant. And that, of course, makes them sink.
Septic tanks installed in tourist camps are another threat to the delta's water. These systems contaminate both ground and surface water. In the absence of the required slopes on the islands, septic tanks are usually placed close to the campsite, which is invariably very near the water's edge.
Most of these camps are situated on islands, and what people don't realize is that these islands have a very high water table, which means that when you've got a septic tank system, the potential to pollute the groundwater is in fact incredibly high. So what one would want to do is to put the septic tank systems as far towards the center of these islands as possible.
Seteng Motalote conservation biologist on the lookout for fish eagles, once very common residents in these parts. He believes that a decline in the fish eagle population of the delta should be attributed to the time when chemical cocktails were used as insecticides.
Because the fish eagle tends to be occupying the highest level of the food chain here, it has been affected more because they believe that organochlorines like DDE, they tended to have accumulated more on the fish eagles and therefore causing mortality and low breeding success in the fish eagles.
Apart from spilling petrol, motorboats are a threat to oxygen and nutrient-producing processes, especially in the lower delta with its seasonal floodplains. By stirring up sediments, plants and microorganisms are being deprived of light, the basic energy source they need. Motorboats cause more damage to floating plants than the traditional mokoros. The African jacana need this vegetation to walk across as they search for food. The more strict motorboat control measures in the lower delta is probably the reason why more jacanas are seen there. Excessive noise is another form of pollution that prevents certain birds from breeding. This is critical during the breeding season when smaller and shyer species are flushed out by the noise created by passing motorboats, leaving the eggs and nestlings vulnerable to sudden temperature changes and predators. The most important heronry in southern Africa is possibly Kadikwe Lagoon in Moreni. The bounty and diversity of the birds at Kadikwe was one of the highlights of the Okavango Rap. The slow-moving fish-filled water provides the perfect nesting habitat for numerous species such as cormorants, storks, herons and egrets. The populations of two rare and endangered species at Kadikwe, namely the slaty egret and the yellow-billed stork, represent their most important breeding concentrations in our subcontinent. And because of the good rains and exceptional floods, the breeding season started in June, 2 months earlier than normal.
And the flush rate, due to...
Seteng Motalote is now more than ever determined to lobby for restrictions on motorboat traffic near the breeding sites at Kadikwe, the bird haven which left him very optimistic about the future of the delta.
From the noise, the music coming from the heronry, it appears that, the heronry in Kadikwe is in very good shape, and hopefully, since this is a very important, breeding site, we'll be getting more and more birds, stoking the entire delta, making it more lively and beautiful with the birds.
3 weeks after the organizers and scientists introduced the rap to the public in Maun, they presented the preliminary results. The mood was optimistic, even though the final results will only be available in a few months' time. The rap left the impression that one of the world's largest wetlands, with its unique terrestrial and aquatic species, its intricate connections between water and land, is generally in good shape. But beyond the data collected lurk imminent dangers to this wilderness of global biological significance. This prompted the Okavango Rap, which together with other research will provide a scientific baseline to monitor and control these threats.